You've heard the saying, some places are born cursed. Let me tell you, Black Hollow isn't just cursed, it's hungry. And it all started the night I returned to my hometown, a place I swore I'd never set foot in again. But when your little sister vanishes without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a voicemail of her screaming your name, well, you don't get to hide from the past anymore. I drove into Black Hollow under a bruised twilight sky, the kind that makes the pine trees look like skeletal hands clawing at the horizon. The town hadn't changed. Same rusted gas station, same boarded-up diner with its flickering neon sign, Eat at Joe's, though Joe died a decade ago, and the only thing eating here now were the rats. But none of that mattered. My sister Lila was last seen near the old Harlow house, a rotting Victorian mansion squatting at the edge of the woods. The townsfolk called it the Widow's Maw, a name that made sense once you saw its sagging porch, the warped boards gaping like broken teeth. The sheriff refused to search the property. Ain't no law that can reach into that house, he'd grumbled, eyes darting to the woods. But Lila's phone had pinged there, so at midnight, flashlight in hand, I kicked in the front door. The smell hit me first, wet earth and spoiled meat. My beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls papered in peeling crimson florals, their patterns squirming like veins. And then I heard it, a whisper, not from one direction, but from everywhere, a chorus of voices, too many to count, hissing just below the edge of hearing. You shouldn't be here. I followed the sound upstairs, each creaking step making my bones ache. The second-floor hallway stretched impossibly long, doors lining both sides. All closed, all silent, except the last one. It stood ajar, a sliver of blackness pulsing like a living thing. Inside, Lila's backpack lay abandoned on a dust-shrouded bed, and that's when the whispers sharpened into words. She's ours now, but you can join her. I ran, down the stairs, through the foyer, but the front door was gone, just a solid wall of mold-streaked plaster. The whispers swelled, laughing now, as the house breathed, walls contracting, floorboards groaning. A cold hand brushed my neck. I spun, swinging the flashlight, but there was nothing, only the faint imprint of fingers glowing on my skin. Then, a whimper, not from the house, from below, the basement. The door was hidden beneath a threadbare rug, its iron handle icy to the touch. The stairs spiraled down into a void so thick my light barely pierced it. The air tasted metallic, like blood on the tongue. At the bottom, I found a room straight out of a nightmare. Rusted chains hung from the ceiling. Symbols, crude, ancient things, were carved into the stone walls. And in the center, a pit, a perfect circle, 3 feet wide, its edges stained black. The whispers roared out of it, a cacophony of rage and hunger. But it wasn't empty. Lila's voice rose from the dark. Help me, please. I lunged for the pit, gripping its rim, and shined my light down. 20 feet below, my sister crouched in the dirt, her face streaked with tears. But her eyes, they weren't hers, pupils blown wide, black as the pit itself. You shouldn't have come back, she said, and then her mouth kept moving, but the voice wasn't human. It was the house, the earth, the thing beneath it. The walls shook. Dirt rained from the ceiling as the pit began to widen, cracks spiderwebbing outward. Lila smiled, her jaw unhinging like a snake's, and she crawled straight up the sheer wall, bones snapping and reforming as she moved. I stumbled back, but the stairs were gone. The chains clinked to life, slithering toward me like serpents. That's when I saw them, the others, figures peeling out of the shadows, their faces familiar. Mrs. Harlow, the widow who'd hung herself in 1923, Old Man Briggs, who'd vanished hunting in these woods, all of them staring with those same black eyes. The flashlight died. In the dark, something seized my ankle, cold, skeletal, ravenous. I kicked free, falling backward, and the floor gave way. I woke in the woods at dawn, dew soaking my clothes. No house, no pit, just a charred circle of grass where the foundation should have been. The sheriff found me there, wild-eyed and babbling. He didn't believe me, of course. No one did, even when I showed him the marks on my ankle. 5 jagged burns, as if a hand of fire had grabbed me. But here's what they don't know. Last night, I heard the whispers again, in my apartment, in the walls. And when I peeled back the wallpaper, I found the same symbols from the basement, carved into the plaster. They're spreading. The sheriff's wife called this morning. He's missing. And Lila. I saw her outside my window, standing beneath a street lamp, her body twisted like a broken doll. She mouthed 2 words before dissolving into shadows. It's coming. So listen carefully. If your town has a place like Black Hollow, a place that feels wrong, don't ignore it. Don't dig into its secrets. Because once you hear the whispers, they don't stop. They get louder. And sooner or later, they'll find a way in. They say every town has its ghosts, but in Mercy Lake, the ghosts remember your name. I learned that the hard way, 10 years after I fled that godforsaken place. I swore I'd never go back, not after what happened to Clara. We were 12 when she vanished, my best friend, my only friend, in that town of scowling faces and silent judgments. They found her sneakers floating in the lake, laces tied together like a joke or a warning. But when my mother's panicked call came last week, her voice cracking as she hissed, "Clara's back. She's at the lake, and she's asking for you." Well, some curses won't let you run forever. Mercy Lake hadn't aged. It had rotted. The water, once a sparkling blue, now gleamed oil black under the moon. The docks sagged like broken ribs, and the old lighthouse on the far shore, a crumbling sentinel with a shattered lantern, seemed to glare at me as I parked by the shore. The town had emptied years ago, but my mother's house still stood, its windows boarded, porch choked with weeds. She wasn't inside. Her note waited on the kitchen table, scrawled in red ink. They lied about the drownings. Follow the light. Save her. That's how I ended up in a stolen rowboat at midnight, oars dipping into water so cold it burned. The lighthouse loomed closer, its bricks weeping algae, the stench of decay clinging to the air. But it wasn't empty. A faint glow pulsed in its tower, a sickly green light that didn't flicker like fire, didn't behave like light at all. It rippled, as if something beneath the lake's surface were breathing onto it. The tower stairs groaned under my weight, each step crunching with dead mussel shells. The green light throbbed above, casting jagged shadows that slithered across the walls. And then I heard it, a wet, gurgling laugh. Clara's laugh, the one she'd used when we'd stolen candy from Old Man Vickery's store. "You're late," she whispered, her voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. The lantern room was a tomb. The glass panes were shattered, the floor littered with shards that glinted like teeth. In the center stood the light source, a corroded metal pedestal holding a jar of murky water. Inside, something coiled and uncoiled, black tendrils brushing the glass, and floating in the water, teeth, human teeth, dozens of them. Clara stood beside it, or at least it wore Clara's skin. Her hair was still that same wheat gold, but it dripped lake water onto the floor. Her eyes were lidless, bulging, the irises swallowed by pupils as wide and dark as the lake at midnight. She grinned, and her lips split at the corners, bloodless. "You shouldn't have left me," she said, tilting her head. "The dark down here, it's so loud." I stumbled back, but the stairs were gone. The walls bled, rivulets of black water seeping through the bricks. Clara lunged, her fingers clawed and webbed, her jaw unhinging like a pike's. I ducked, slamming into the pedestal. The jar shattered. The thing inside exploded. It wasn't water. It was alive. A thrashing, ink-black mass that screeched like 100 drowning voices. It engulfed Clara, dissolving her flesh in seconds, bones popping like bubbles. Then it came for me. I leaped through the shattered window, falling 2 stories into the lake. The water wasn't cold anymore. It was hungry. Hands, slimy, skeletal, clamped onto my ankles. Faces bloomed in the dark. Mrs. Hargrove, the librarian who drowned herself after her son's disappearance. Tommy Finch, the boy who'd vanished on a dare to swim the lake's center. Their mouths stretched in silent screams as they dragged me deeper. My lungs burned. The green light above dimmed. Then, a grip like iron yanked me upward. I woke on the shore, vomiting lake water that writhed with tiny black worms. The dawn sky was the color of a bruise. The lighthouse stood intact. No green light, no broken glass. But in my fist was a clue. A rusted locket I'd torn free from Clara's neck as the thing consumed her. Inside, a photo of us as kids, grinning on the dock, and a date, October 31st, 1985, the night before she vanished. The sheriff, what's left of the town's law, found me. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a file. "Your mama left this for you," he muttered, already walking away. Inside, newspaper clippings, missing persons reports dating back to 1823, all connected to the lake, all hushed up, and a handwritten confession from the town's founders. "We pledged a life each generation to keep the waters calm. The light bearer demands it." The light bearer, the thing in the jar, the thing that's been feeding on Mercy Lake for centuries. And my mother, the last keeper of the lighthouse, had broken the cycle. She'd refused to give it Clara, so it took Clara anyway. And now it was starving. Last night, the lake froze over. In July, footprints appeared in the frost, leading from the shore to my mother's house. Inside, the walls dripped, and the smell of rotting fish clung to every room. But the worst part? The voices, from the faucets, the pipes, all whispering the same word: choose. I'm writing this from the motel outside town. The clerk just knocked on my door. A package arrived. No return address. Inside, the jar, empty. But the glass is warm, and when I press my ear to it, I hear the lake, the screams, and Clara's voice, clear as day. It needs a new keeper. Run. But I can't. The road's out of town. They all loop back to the lake. The sheriff's cruiser sits abandoned by the dock, his hat floating in the water. And the lighthouse? Its light just flickered back on. Green. Hungry. So listen to me. If you ever see a light where there shouldn't be one, on a lonely shore, in a forgotten woods, turn around. Don't follow it. Don't ever let it learn your name, because the drowning light doesn't just take sacrifices, it collects them. They say every town has its secrets, but in Red Brook, the secrets don't stay buried. They crawl out, screaming. I should have known better than to answer the phone. 10 years I'd been gone. 10 years since my brother Eli disappeared into the storm drains beneath Red Brook Asylum. The police called it a runaway case. The townsfolk called it poetic justice. for our family's sins. But when a voicemail arrived last Tuesday, a garbled, wet voice rasping, "Jess, the tunnels, they're hollowing me out." I recognized Eli's broken stutter, the one he'd had since the fire. The asylum waited on the hill like a crown of thorns, its cracked limestone walls streaked with rust. They'd shut it down in the 80s after the incident, but the iron gates still creaked open for me, as if the place had been expecting my return. The town below was a graveyard, storefronts boarded up, church steeple collapsed. Even the crows avoided the sky here. But the worst part? The silence. No wind, no crickets. Just the crunch of dead leaves under my boots as I climbed the hill. Eli's old flashlight trembling in my hand. The front doors were chained, but Eli's voice slithered through the cracks, pleading, "Jess, hurry, it's in the walls." I smashed a window, glass shredding my palms, and climbed into the lobby. The air was thick with the smell of burnt hair and ammonia. My light swept over peeling murals of angels, their faces scratched out, and a reception desk littered with patient files, their pages warped by mildew, and the noises skittering above the ceiling tiles like something dragging its belly through the ducts. Eli's voice came again, clearer now. "Basement. They're in the basement." The elevator shaft was a gaping mouth. Cables snapped. I took the stairs, each flight descending deeper into a cold that bit like teeth. The basement door was sealed with a crossbar, but the wood around the lock was splintered, freshly. Inside, the hallway stretched into pitch black, the walls pocked with holes the size of fists, and the whispers, not words, but numbers, overlapping in a manic chant. 7777. Eli's flashlight died. I slapped it, and the beam flickered, just long enough to see the figure at the end of the hall. A boy in a soaked hospital gown, his back to me, hair matted with mud. "Eli?" I choked out. The boy turned. His face was gone, not torn off, not rotted, just erased, smooth as porcelain, save for a lipless mouth crammed with jagged yellowed teeth. It grinned, and the numbers crescendoed, 777, as the walls began to weep. A thick black ooze bubbled from the holes, splattering the floor. It moved, alive. Tendrils lashed out, snatching my ankles, yanking me toward the thing. I kicked free, scrambling backward, but the ooze surged faster, forming shapes, skeletal hands, eyeless faces, all melting and reforming as they clawed at me. A door, half rotted, hidden under a collapsed shelf. I dove through it, slamming it shut as the ooze thudded against the wood. The room was small, a storage closet, and in the corner, curled in a pool of murky water, was Eli. Real Eli. His left arm was gone, the stump wrapped in filthy bandages. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but still his. "Jess," he wept, reaching for me. "It's been pulling pieces off me, feeding them to the walls." I gripped his hand, icy, too light, like holding a bird's hollow bones. "What is this place?" I hissed. "Dr. Vane's experiment," he coughed. "They called it the hollowing. He thought he could cure madness by carving it out. But it wasn't the patients he hollowed. It was the asylum." The door shuddered. The ooze seeped through the cracks, hissing as it hit the floor. Eli's eyes widened. "It's coming. The only way out is through the storm drains. But Jess, you can't let it see you." We ran. Eli led me through a maze of crumbling corridors, the walls pulsating now, the numbers chant rising to a fever pitch. The ooze flooded behind us, snapping like wolves. Ahead, a rusted grate hung loose, the entrance to the drains. Eli shoved me in first. "Follow the red marks," he screamed. "Don't stop." The tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare. the ceiling so low I crawled on my elbows. Eli's red marks, handprints and faded paint, glowed in my flashlight beam. The air reeked of sewage and something sweetly rotten. And then, the whispers returned. Not numbers this time. Names. Jessica. Jessica. We've been waiting. The voice was mine. I froze. Ahead, the tunnel split. Sitting cross-legged in the left passage was a girl. Me, or a thing wearing my skin, its jaw unhinged, tongue replaced by a centipede-like chain of human teeth. Stay with us, it cooed, scuttling forward. Dr. Vane needs more parts. I scrambled backward, took the right tunnel, and the thing's laughter echoed behind me. The red marks led to a vertical shaft, a ladder ascending into darkness. I climbed, arms burning, until my head hit a metal hatch. It opened into a tiled room, an operating theater. Dr. Vane's journal lay on the surgical table, its pages open to an illustration, a tumorous mass with countless limbs, labeled the Hollow Heart. Notes described how the asylum had become a living entity, fueled by the suffering of the patients, how it needed fresh parts to sustain itself, how Eli had been its latest meal. A wet gasp echoed behind me. Eli stood in the doorway, his remaining arm clutching his stomach. "Jess, I'm sorry," he whispered, and his body ruptured, ribs bursting outward as the ooze exploded from his chest. It engulfed him, molding into a towering figure with too many arms, Dr. Vane's melted face grinning from its core. "Thank you for returning him," it gurgled. "But a heart needs both halves to beat." I ran, down hallways that bent like intestines, through rooms where the walls bled and the floors breathed, until I found an exit, a window overlooking the town. I jumped, glass tearing my skin, and hit the earth running. The police found me at dawn, half dead in the cemetery. They dismissed my ravings, even when I showed them the black veins creeping up my arm from where the ooze had brushed me. The asylum burned that night. An electrical fire, they said, but I know the truth. I saw Eli in the flames, or the thing that used to be Eli. It waved as the roof collapsed, its new limbs twisting like smoke. Now the veins have reached my chest. I hear the numbers again, quieter, inside me. 7 days, they whisper. And last night, I woke to a handprint on my bathroom mirror. Small, child-sized, glowing red. So listen, if you ever drive past a building that makes your skin prickle, a school, a hospital, a house with too many shadows, don't stop. Don't look. Because some places aren't haunted by the dead. They're haunted by what they've become. Some curses aren't buried, they're breathing. I should have burned the letter the moment it arrived. The postmark alone should have warned me. Crimson Mine, Colorado, a town erased from maps after the collapse of '79, when the earth swallowed 47 men, including my father. They never found the bodies. But last month, an envelope stained with coal dust appeared in my mailbox. Inside, a single page torn from my father's journal, dated the day he died. They're singing in the walls. I have to go deeper. And beneath that, scrawled in fresh ink, "Clara, come home. I'm still down here." The bus dropped me off at a dead-end road 10 miles from the ruins of Crimson Mine. The forest had reclaimed the town, wooden skeletons of houses jutting through ivy, the church steeple impaled on a pine tree. But the mine entrance remained, a jagged mouth in the mountainside, its rails rusted and twisted like veins. The air smelled of sulfur and burnt copper, and the wind, it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like humming, a low, dissonant chord that vibrated in my molars. I found his helmet near the entrance, its lamp still intact. Dad's name was etched into the leather, Elias Voss. The beam of light trembled as I stepped into the shaft. The walls glittered oddly, not with coal, but with a glassy black mineral that reflected my face in jagged fragments, each version of me mouthing silent words. The humming grew louder, harmonizing with my pulse. Then, the whispers began. "Clara, dig deeper." The voice wasn't my father's. It was many voices, rasping, overlapping, some speaking English, others in languages I didn't recognize. The tunnel branched, but the whispers guided me left, always left, deeper into the mountain. The air grew thick, hot, until I stumbled into a cavern, and there he was, or what was left of him. Dad stood in the center, his back to me, still wearing his mining overalls, but his skin had turned the same glassy black as the walls, his limbs elongated, fingers dragging the ground like pickaxes. The cavern wasn't empty. Dozens of figures surrounded him, all fused to the walls, their torsos and faces protruding from the rock as if the mountain had mid-swallowed them. Their mouths moved in unison, chanting the whispers. "Clara," Dad croaked, his head rotating 180 degrees, eyes glowing faintly amber. "You shouldn't have come." I stumbled back, but the tunnel was gone, sealed by a slab of black stone. The figures began to extract themselves from the walls, their bodies cracking like coal, shedding dust as they shambled forward. Dad's jaw unhinged, and the humming swelled into a deafening roar. The cavern shook, and the floor split open, revealing a chasm filled with swirling black liquid. It wasn't water. It bubbled, viscous and alive, tendrils lashing up to grab my ankles. Dad lunged, his clawed hand grazing my arm, and the world shifted. Suddenly, I was him. July 16th, 1979, the mine collapsing, men screaming, the walls bleeding that same black liquid, drowning them. Dad crawling, burning, as the substance coated his skin, hardening, changing him. The whispers promising survival, at a cost. Become the mountain, feed it. I snapped back to the present, my forearm now mottled with glassy black patches. The figures closed in, their chant a hammer to my skull. The chasm yawned at my feet. Desperate, I swung Dad's helmet at the wall, and the mineral screamed. A high-pitched shatter as the glassy surface fractured, the figures recoiling. I smashed it again, and the slab sealing the tunnel cracked. I ran. The mine groaned around me, walls oozing black sludge, hands bursting from the rock to snatch at my hair. The whispers became a wail. "Stay, stay, stay." As I reached daylight, I didn't stop until I'd crossed the tree line, my lungs raw. The sheriff found me at a gas station 50 miles away. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a file. Inside, a photo of the mine's owners from 1872, their faces identical to the figures in the cavern, and a report dated 1954. Subject exposed to black vitae, exhibits rapid cellular mineralization, recommends containment. But here's what the file didn't mention. The black patches on my arm are spreading. When I press my ear to them, I hear the mountain's pulse. And last night, I woke to the smell of sulfur and Dad's helmet on my dresser, filled with fresh coal. The whispers are quieter now, closer. "Come home, Clara." So hear me. If you ever find yourself near a place that hums, a cave, a tunnel, a mine shaft that stares back, don't answer. Don't dig, because the earth isn't always silent. Sometimes it hungers.